Morning, everyone. This is the IPython Jupyter on-air dev meeting for September 25th, and we'll hop on the agenda straight up. I think Adrian is first with the pull request on the revisions on the logo design. So, Adrian, go ahead.
Yeah, so I played around with the moons. I made them bigger, but then I also was playing around with what you said, Fernando, about making it more in a square format. So would love to get feedback on that so that that can get finished.
So, what do people think of that last one, where basically it's a very slight variation on the one we had settled on, where the moons are a little bigger, and Adrian just rotated two of them slightly so that the aspect ratio of the bounding box would be a little bit more square.
Yeah, I really like it. Especially with the planet in the horizontal position.
Yeah.
I think when it's in the 45-degree angled position, it starts to look a little bit like some sort of character.
Yes, it gets an emoticon flavor to it. In the rotated position, it looks a little bit like an emoticon. I totally agree. Whereas the other one in the diagonal position, they were off enough that they were off enough from kind of the gap. They were not aligned with the gap, and so it didn't feel as much as an emoticon. I agree with that sentiment. Anyone else? Thoughts?
Should we consider getting rid of the 45-degree entirely? Just use horizontal?
I'm open to that. I mean,
seems to work better when it's horizontal.
So we would have it horizontal basically horizontal always, either empty on the side or with a J, or when it has the full word inside is what you mean.
Yeah, if being, although, yeah, if the rotated one is the problem, you could just not have that.
Yeah, that would work. But then are you saying, so having this more square arrangement of the moons?
Yeah.
But then not the 45-degree tilt?
Yeah.
Yeah.
In that case, it might be worth having a look at what trying it out and then generating the small versions with and without the J, so that we see, because one thing that the J works, the 45 rotation works well in that it creates a fair amount of vertical space. So for the vertical J, it lets you put a pretty big and visible vertical J. That would, if it's horizontal, it'll squeeze the vertical area for the J quite a bit. But we can try. Yeah. No, I think it's a good idea. Adrian, can you give that a spin? And I think at that point we can just make a decision. I mean, I think we're down. I do like the size distribution much better. I think it's going to work a lot better. So I think with the horizontal we can make a final call, and either we keep the original positions as before, and we keep the 45 as before, but just with the new sizes, or we go with the new positions, and that may mean dropping the diagonal altogether, and we can make a call between those two options.
Okay. I'm sorry, what?
There was one, I thought we had talked about the planet fitting in the X height of the text. And that's not what it does right now?
Yeah.
I don't remember if we had decided against that, if that makes the planet seem too small, or...
Adrian, did you have any particular criteria, Adrian, when you chose the height of the bounding box of the planet? Did you kind of eyeball it, or did you mean it to be aligned with the full descending lines of the characters, or with the X height, or did you have anything specific in mind?
I had it where it was the same height, or the X height, with the moons, and it just felt kind of small.
Okay.
So having the planet be close to the X height, but I can also mock one of those up and throw that in the pull request and see.
No, I mean I think I mean, do you want to see it? I'm willing to trust. If you've already tried it, Adrian,
It just felt kind of small, and then the name looked kind of huge, which I
Okay.
mean that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it just gives a very different feel than what it is.
And do you get a sense that you get a sense that this worked better? Okay. Min, would you really want to see that, or do we go with Adrian's judgment on this one?
Did you put the moons inside the lines as well, or did you let them go outside?
They're outside.
Okay.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind seeing it just in black and white.
Okay.
Yeah, because when I use the logo in context and things, it seems too big.
Okay.
The planet seems too big. But
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. That's easy to do.
Cool.
Okay.
And we'll try to give you feedback quickly on this, Adrian, so that hopefully we'll have this finished by tomorrow.
Yeah, that would be great.
Yeah. We need to move on. Do you have anything else in mind, Adrian, on this front that you'd like input from us, so that you can kind of get back to doing useful work and not us annoying you?
No, I was working on the sign-in page for the Jupyter Hub, and I tried to upload it, but I got confused. So I will upload that as soon as I can to start getting feedback on it.
Okay.
But it's not completed, but it's started.
Okay, so on those things, don't get stuck. If you're having kind of technical issues with that stuff, that's probably not a topic for the live meeting. But we're happy to hop on the Gitter chat room. We can give you a hand, and if need, we can open like a one-on-one chat with you, a Google Hangout, just one-on-one, and screen share and give you a hand. So don't
I was gonna try and put it up this morning, but it didn't work.
Cool.
So
no worries. Don't get stuck on that. We're happy to help as needed.
Great. That's all I have.
All right, awesome. Well, great work, and thanks a lot.
Yeah,
so that means we'll also wait for that, which was the second item in the agenda, for that to be uploaded, and we'll do that with you.
Cool.
Okay. The 5-minute executive summary of the widget output unification mega discussion. I'd love to hear the cliff notes.
I'll let Brian go first.
Don't you all dodge the bullet at the same time, kids.
I'll take the bullet.
Okay.
The idea is to unify widgets and output, and from the Python side, we want to enable output to be addressable, for there to be multiple output areas that can be written to or cleared separately, and also that can be nested inside widget hierarchies.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
The main sticking point is the notebook document format, and our original idea, this is John and my idea the other day, was to turn outputs, outputs is already a list in the notebook document, and that would become a list of entities that are either a standard output or some new JSON object that has a reference to a model, a widget model that exists elsewhere in the notebook. And the reason it has to be a reference is that the relationship between cells and widget models is many to many.
Mm-hmm.
And so the appropriate...
There can be linkages between something here can refer to another piece of data elsewhere. Yeah.
And also in widget hierarchies, all of the referencing between children and parents is done by reference in the widget models themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was our initial thinking, and Min was not fond of having a global separate store for widget model data. And so the question is, do we try to put the widget model data in the cells? And I think that's the main crux of the design question that we're struggling with right now.
Where would the canonical, all these references will be referring? Wow, Jason is jumping into the fray. Awesome, Jason. Welcome to the ring.
All right, so let's actually move on to a different topic, not widget now.
About 90 seconds left.
Okay. So the question really seems to be: do we have are these references going to refer to a separate? Well, first of all, is that data that we want to store in the notebook in the first place? I would imagine, right? And second, if so, do various references identify a location that can be in any one cell, and one has basically the root copy of an entity and the others refer to it, versus are they all holding references and there is a widget store area? And I can imagine somebody must be worried about, oh gosh, this is like a real slippery slope of complexity, and now we're effectively building an entire application framework within a document format, right? Somebody has to be worried.
Yeah,
I'm horribly worried.
Somebody
just said pretty much it
I
can
think
be that on an issue.
the scope of what, so something that makes, as I've said in a few previous discussions, functionality that makes perfect sense, is super useful, and wildly out of scope is persisting kernel state to the notebook format.
Uh-huh.
And currently, it sounds like the scope of persisting widget stuff is persisting 100%, basically the front-end interactive state, 100% to the notebook document format. And some of the issues with the model store, which would be an unordered dictionary keyed by UUIDs, would mean that it's 100% diff every time.
Mm-hmm.
And if you have things like addressable output, which is regular output, but that goes not in the cell, because it's not regular output that's in the primary output area, if it goes in some widget model, would no longer be in the cell, it would be in this unordered UUID churn blob. Which seems non-ideal, just because it's addressable. And plus, it's not a model, right? When you've got an addressable output, it's not a model. It's not a bootstrap model. It's not synced with anything. It doesn't have multiple views. It's just output that's addressable. I don't know. I have worries about two main things. One is, how do you decide what models to persist? And it is obvious to me that it's absolutely not all of the models that happen to be in the state of the client side. There's no way that's what should be persisted, because that's not persisting output, which is what the notebook document format does. That's persisting runtime state.
Yeah, runtime state.
But at the same time, refreshing the page discards the runtime state of the JavaScript, and it doesn't discard the runtime state of the kernel. So there's logic behind that. It's just.
But at some point, we want at some point to have state that is kept on the server while the server is running. So maybe that's something that we will want to be stored in memory in the server, but not in the document format. Because right now there is a different, like you rely on what is on disk to load the notebook in the browser, but at some point we will have an intermediate layer that stores things.
Suppose we have a format, two versions of saving. One version that just saves the input and is a very sparse, lean format that's easily diffed, but another format that saves as much data as possible, or no, that's the wrong thing to say. Saves a lot of data. So, for example, if you have an output image right now, you're saving a ton of data to the notebook. This base64 encoded image. So you could have a lean save that would just save input, basically, enough to reconstruct the state of the notebook if you ran it. But then you have a full output format that would save the output plus relevant widget models, etc.
Well, one thing that we've talked about, and I think we should consider this in the context of also eventually static widgets for static HTML with widgets and that kind of thing, is we've always talked about the possibility of having a companion file, just like when you export to HTML, we create the underscore files directory that has ancillary images and whatnot, having companion. And I am actually more inclined to building something where there's a concept of one or potentially more kind of sidecar files that contain these additionally large, potentially binary blobs, so that you can easily filter them by extension. You can put them in your git ignore patterns. You can make decisions on where they go or where they never go. Maybe they're never persisted, or some organization could decide that those things get persisted on a database binary store, but not on the normal version control, whatever. And but not having what I think is a bad idea is having the notion of multiple ways for a notebook to be valid, one being very light and simple, and another one being a fairly heavyweight and complicated thing where we ram every conceivable binary blob into the notebook itself. That's so, and we don't have that side format yet. Something tells me we're not going to solve this one in the next 4 to 6 weeks. I mean, I am truly. I mean, I think this is a very, very interesting problem, and I think it's a problem we do need to solve and solve it well. I don't think it's a problem we want to jump into right now. I feel like we're a little bit under the gun. We really need to land. We have such a massive amount of work up in the air right now that we need to land by year's end. That I think we're going to have to be willing to live with a little bit of pain and incompleteness. And I know, Jason, that with all the work that you guys are doing, that may not be exactly what you want to hear.
No, so I think what we want to hear is something that's sustainable.
But exactly.
We're willing to work with things, and actually having sidecar files or a zip archive like an open office document or something like that, or MHT HTML file. May be the best way to go, because it addresses the bigger problem of how do you put a lot of data with a lightweight code file.
Yeah, and what I don't want to do is feel rushed into a decision, sort of just because we have to get 3.0 out in the next few weeks. Let's
Sure.
rush into making a decision into a massively complicated file format, where that we are committing to in the next few weeks. I don't want to make this decision with kind of a gun pointed to my head of something has to be out in 6 weeks, and this absolutely must go in.
So the cool thing is it's easy for us to experiment with this, right? Experiment with sidecar files, experiment with putting things into just the notebook metadata store, which is just this big, huge blob that's stored with the notebook.
Mm-hmm.
And sort of see what feels natural.
So that's the direction that I would encourage, experimenting with some form of sidecar storage. And let's gain experience with this. Let's get 3.0 out the door with only the minimal functionality that we feel comfortable, doesn't bloat the format, and solves the most pressing problems. Mm-hmm. And then let's learn over the spring of next year. Hopefully, in the spring dev meeting, you guys can make it to the meeting, and we can hammer on this problem really hard after you've collected a little bit of more experience. And then in the next couple of weeks, when Brian and I are in New York, we can try to block time at Bloomberg to kind of hammer a lot on this question, but without a commitment that a final decision will be made in the next 4 weeks. That's the one thing that I want to feel pushed into. Is that okay?
That sounds great to me. What about you, Brian?
I just want to clarify. I mean, in my mind, that means we're not doing static widgets and persistent of widgets at all.
Not at all.
I mean,
Not in core.
I mean,
you got to have something in the.
Yeah, I mean, even if you're using sidecar files, you have to put something in the notebook document that. I mean, you just have to have something there.
Yeah.
And I mean, I'm fine if that's our decision, but in the past, the idea has been we don't want to update the notebook format after 3.0 for years.
Yeah, well, we did. I opened an issue for this about kind of formalizing extension points in the notebook format so that we can do minor revision. We can do more significant changes with backward compatible changes.
Yeah, because we don't want to do another backward incompatible change to the notebook format for a long time. But if we design the NB format for so that there's enough flexibility in it, then we can.
Yeah, because we were able to add metadata without without a major change, right? We did that.
Yep.
And we can, and the same kind of thing where it's just adding new keys and adding, like if you added a bunch of widget state in a global models dict, that would be a valid notebook. It would open fine. You just wouldn't get your widgets because it doesn't understand them. And that would be fine. The harder part that we would need to, that I think we can do, is do things like define behavior for an unrecognized output type. Right? Because right now the notebook will actually fail to load if an output type is unrecognized. But there's no reason that has to be the case. Mm-hmm. We could say this is an unrecognized output thing. Just ignore it, leave it alone. Maybe put a placeholder saying I didn't understand what was here.
And just put the MIME type or some short blob describing.
Yeah, I think it's one of the obvious part in that, like if we add keys to a dictionary, we can ignore new keys. Anywhere where we have a list of something and each of those things has a foo type attribute, like cell type or output type,
I don't
ignore ones that we don't recognize.
I don't think this in any way solves the problem, because we will be the ones who are going to use these extension points, and the second that we use them, they're official, and we can't change.
So, I don't understand. How is that a problem?
I mean, I guess.
I mean, it's a future compatibility. Like, it's not a customization thing. It's a future compatibility.
This is so that we can add widgets in NB format 4.1 or 4.2 or whatever.
And the notebook will be able to open with with everything that it understands, and safely ignore in a variably, we can decide how loudly, but safely, kind of officially define, I don't know the behavior for I don't know how to handle this.
Okay.
Because right now, that behavior is, this thing is invalid, I can't do it, die.
It won't even open, yeah.
Even though the widget things, our default front end will know how to handle.
Well, the JavaScript won't know how to reconstruct it, so it doesn't really matter.
But you can define handlers for things. So if you can define, if our front end can define, or somewhere can define a handler for, I don't know how to handle this, here's the MIME type or whatever, does anybody else, have they registered a handler for it?
Yeah, presumably we wouldn't implement loading from a file before we implement writing to a file. Like, that's the only case in which our front end would be able to read it without being able to write it.
All right. Well, we should probably move on, but now we all know what to think about.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah, we knew we weren't going to crack this one right away. The three of us over lunch will hammer on this again, and we'll keep pounding on it in the next few weeks. This is a hard one, but hey, that's why they call it research, I guess. All right.
So real quick.
Go ahead, Jason, please.
Right now, we could trigger on a notebook save and write an arbitrary blob to the notebook metadata, and then trigger on a notebook load and read that arbitrary blob back, right?
Mm-hmm.
So really, the flexibility is there to do sort of whatever we want.
But the second we start to do it, we can't change it in the future. Like, even if it's in metadata, it still becomes part of the effective
unofficial spec.
That's
okay.
Yeah. But Brian, Jason could experiment with that in the branch that they use internally and gain experience, and actually effectively, because we do have hooks for reading and loading from metadata, it bypasses the issue of putting hooks in the server to do that from the file system. And so that could be a good way. Yes, it's going to be ugly because he's going to be shoving some obscene amount of stuff into the metadata, but it is a way of playing with this idea, and Jason can gain pretty valuable, both solve his immediate problems and gain a lot of really good experience on what works and what doesn't. And because it'll be isolated under the key that he knows, he can even put hooks into his version control machinery to scrub that one field out. You can put a git commit hook to scrub it out on.
You can use a separate file, because you can write your custom backend and just remove this metadata field and dump it on the disk as a separate file if you want, and read it back. Yeah. So you don't even need to shove it into the real file on the disk.
So
the key is how it'll interact with the iframe security stuff. That's crossing that barrier will be an interesting question. But okay, I just wanted to throw that out there as a possible way to move forward. But
if you can start playing with that and kind of keep giving us feedback on what works and what doesn't, that'd be awesome.
Of course. Yep. Okay. Great.
Awesome. Temp NB?
Yeah. I guess it'd be good for me to talk about scoping and everything else for that little side project.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if Brian wants to explain more, or if I should just talk about it as what it does. So we created this TempNB, which just creates an ephemeral notebook server off on a path for arbitrary user, hits the URL, and it creates a notebook server for them, complete with R and IPython with 3 and 2 off the master branch and a whole bunch of packages. And it only takes a few seconds to boot up a new one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and we were moving on it pretty fast.
Mm-hmm.
And Matthias was like, what is going on here? What features are going in? Why are we leaving open notebooks on the wild? Like, what is this? So, yeah, and I can demo it now too. I have it on an IP.
Yeah, go ahead.
Cool.
Do you do a screen share thing?
Yeah,
I'm plugging in.
So, what kind of security protections are you providing?
This is why
we
I'm
have
glad
this in the
Jason's here
same
today.
cell server.
Oh, I know.
Basically, my concern was that you could. It's public URL. We won't give the URL to avoid issues. I mean, like now it's public now because Skype just shows the IP. You can just share.
I'm doing it on one that I can tear down.
You can share a link on Twitter and have embedded JavaScript, and the JavaScript will show to you, hey, please enter your credential to access this notebook, and it appears that it's on Jupyter.org, for example, and it's like, okay, so I can trust that because it's on Jupyter. Will I enter my credential? Exactly the same problem that we had on the security mailing list not that long ago.
We could, for instance, so right, we've got the notebook signing thing. We could, for instance, guarantee that notebooks in this context are never load as trusted.
And that was one of my questions. What is the scope? Do we just say notebook are never trusted on that? Try to check the trusting by each browser by storing a cookie or something in local storage?
I think certainly you shouldn't use your base domain for this. I mean, do what a bunch of other web companies do and have a Jupyter-usercontent.org or something. I mean, you don't want cookie. There's a whole bunch of problems if you use your base domain for arbitrary user content.
Do we also, because we have kernel in the back, do we isolate kernel, the network of the kernel so that they cannot write a spam server in 15 seconds because it's a bot that log to that and try to send mails?
Yes. I think those boxes should have no outbound network connections, period. I mean, I think if we're going to have something that is a anonymous free demo, it's purely for illustration purposes. It's really to demonstrate things. I mean, the purely anonymous one is purely to demonstrate basic capabilities. So think of it, this is how I think of it. Go to python.org, the website. Go to python.org right now and click on the yellow little launch interactive shell thing. Click on that, and what you get is that it launches an IPython console, and that's an IPython console from Python Anywhere.
Nice.
Your wife's on Python 3.4.
And that has been on the Python website for the last, I don't know, probably about 8 months, I would say.
Yeah, that's full network access.
What's that?
And it seems to have full network access.
Do they? Okay,
I just did it.
If I wasn't looking at your screen.
I've used it as an IPython calculator when I've needed it.
Yes. And if they are not blocking it, I think we should, because obviously with a notebook it's a lot easier. The thing is, here you have to start typing code manually. With a notebook, it's a lot easier to
copy paste.
Yeah, to copy and paste a huge amount of code and execute it in one shot. So even 5 seconds is enough for somebody to paste a 1,000-line script in a cell and run it, and do a fair amount of execute a lot of code. So, but I would imagine that this Python Anywhere console is still fairly locked down in terms of resources. I'm sure that you can't run a CPU-intensive thing there for hours and hours and hours. So I think the only, and if you do pwd there, it's home/.anon- whatever ls. There's a README. Let's see. The README just says go to Python Anywhere for help. So at most, I would set something like that. This should be a toy. This should not be a tool. And we had talked about, Min and I and Brian were chatting about the possibility of using the Jupyter Hub GitHub OAuth to perhaps provide slightly less toy versions of this, but those are authenticated with people's GitHub credentials. And so go ahead.
The weird thing about the GitHub credentials is anybody could create those. It does create a barrier, but I think automating that is not hard.
Yes, but I'm gonna first of all, I don't think they would be completely unlimited either. I think they would still be. I mean, these are going to be free demos, so they should still have some limitations. Number two, I'm gonna guess GitHub has pretty aggressive monitoring of bot-created accounts. Every big service provider on the internet has to do that because every popular service is targeted by spam account creation systems.
Okay.
So I'm sure that it's easy. It's easy to automate the creation.
Almost all of them get totally destroyed by the spam bot account creation.
What's that?
I said, and almost all of them utterly fail to defeat the spam account creation systems.
Do they? Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, I would view that as an experiment, and if it proves to become a problem, and we do get hit by bot GitHub accounts, I mean, we just shut it down right away. I mean, we're not promising anything persistent to anyone. This is really an experiment, and it's really, I would say, to a large extent, up to what you, Kyle, feel you have the time and the bandwidth and the interest in doing with it, so that it doesn't become. I mean, my only concern is that this doesn't become a rabbit hole where all of a sudden a cool small experiment kind of drags you away from other large efforts, right? That's kind of the only thing. I think there's value. I mean, it would be awesome to have a like try IPython, a full try Jupyter button that goes here, so that any of our users, whenever we want to explain to anyone what does the system look like, just click on that, and they can play with it right away. And that would encourage us to make a better welcome page, a better introduction. That would be wonderful, as long as we're not creating a bit. For example, I know that William Stein was having problems in Cloud SageMath with Bitcoin miners. So basically, those people any machine that offers what looks like free CPU cycles on the internet, the Bitcoin mining crowd will find it and use it. I mean, they're like they smell that like sharks smell blood in the water.
Yep.
Okay, so
Okay. Yeah. So as part of that, Brian was suggesting that we disable autosave. I put in a PR for it. Min was against that one. I'm slightly against it too.
What was disable autosave in tempNB or in IPython in general?
No,
in tempNB.
No, and the issue is that saving right now includes every single time all of the outputs of the notebook. We're just going to completely flood the server with all these notebook servers auto saving
all the time.
All the time.
Remember, our current autosave frequency is very low. Like
We could pump that up.
Something.
Yeah.
I mean, the real issue to me, I mean, the autosave is important, but I think saving in this context should never transmit the outputs.
So you should just disable save?
No.
So save should strip output.
Exactly. In this context.
So
I post a notebook with output on it.
It would be really nice if you could save the notebook here and then publish an anonymous gist or some other way. Be like, oh hey, look what I went ahead and did. Like if you use this service and then you did still want to save what you did, then there's some route to. I mean, I guess you could download it, which is what I did yesterday.
But why is disabling autosave a bad idea? Because I would say that if we disable autosave, most people are just going to use it as a scratch pad and throw it away, and then that cuts a lot of the traffic out. And the few individuals who do want to save something, well, they're going to have to click save on the button manually, so they're not going to do it as often. And then that gives them.
Yeah, I guess I'm actually skeptical of the proposal that it would actually significantly reduce traffic.
Why is that?
It's not a given that that autosave happens dramatically more often than save.
Well, but man, autosave. Let's imagine there's 1,000 simultaneous users randomly jittered in time. It means that we have roughly 10 saves per second hitting.
No, that's assuming all of them are constantly editing their notebook. Like they're all on, they're all logged in, and they are all currently making changes, right? Because it doesn't autosave every 2 minutes. It autosaves in a few minutes if you change the notebook.
Yes. Okay.
But then the other issue is that when people are working, regardless of our autosave, they tend to hit save.
Okay, occasionally, yes. At least some people do.
Yeah.
I mean,
and if they don't, they should.
Yes.
Because if they don't, they're doing it wrong. So either they're saving at least as frequency as autosave saves, or they're doing a bad job.
But I mean, disabling autosave seems to me like a no-brainer in the sense that it
seems like a no-brainer that it shouldn't be done, but
that it reduces we don't know exactly. We wouldn't know until we measure it how much it's going to reduce the frequency, but it will reduce it some, just because.
Yeah. No, it's strictly more traffic.
Exactly, it's strictly more traffic, and this is a context where we want to reduce unnecessary traffic. So
I mean, we don't even know whether traffic will be the limiting factor on this server.
Yeah, there's no evidence that traffic is a problem. There's no evidence that this is problematic. There is clear historical evidence that lacking autosave is super annoying to users.
Yeah, I think if we leave, I mean, I initially thought the rationale for disabling autosave was so that it doesn't imply to users that there's any kind of permanence. But I mean, if they can save manually, I think autosave should keep working at least until we discover it's a problem.
I mean, we can let's not spend too much time on this. We can merge that PR has to be trivial, right? Because that PR that PR is completely. We can keep that PR pending and apply it later if it's needed. Because it's just adding the autosave interval, and so we can apply it later if it's needed. That PR is never going to conflict with anything. I do think that we want to communicate that this is fairly ephemeral, and that the only way to keep your stuff after it gets killed is either to download manually or to send it to a GIST or something. I like the idea of this being like a live paste bin. Hey, let me go play with it. Oh wow, this was cool. Send it to a GIST, send the GIST link to your friends or put it on Twitter, and then shut the system down.
Yeah.
So that I certainly like a lot, but people should know that the system itself is ephemeral, and the only reason to save is so that we have something to send to a GIST, or we have something to give the user to download if they want to download it. but that they have to get the content out because the server will be destroyed. So, okay, all right. Let's not burn too much on this. Let's leave that PR there, and we'll apply it if needed, and we can keep an eye on the system. No, Matthias, we're not going to go full A/B on this. We don't have to go that crazy. I mean, we can do manual A/B, which is we do A now, and if A becomes a problem, we do B later.
Well, the way that it's like distributed, like there's an easy way to do A/B testing. We just route them to that server.
I mean, if you really want to.
I'm just saying it's there, but I'm not going to focus energy on that.
Yeah, there's no point.
Can I just say something in the Sage cell server for very short things? UU encoding base64 encoding it and just slapping it in the URL is a pretty effective way to encode very, very short things. So, cells with just a few, lines of code each or something like that can be effective, but you quickly run into URL limitations. But it's handy because all the state is saved in the URL.
You have URLs that are effectively the code.
The entire, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Which again is great for very small things.
For snippets.
Incredibly handy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you guys limit whether you allow that for cells that have no more than 10 lines or something like that? Do you have any?
We just zip it up, then base64 encode it, slap it in the URL, and originally we had problems because it would be too long. Well, we provide two links. We provide a permalink that's saved on our database, so it's just a reference to that.
Okay.
And then, so we save the code. Just the code. I mean, we're dealing with just a single cell, right?
Yes,
and we save the code and then a reference, but then we also provide this huge URL that maybe their browser can't even handle. But actually, browser URL limitations have increased since we started doing this. So, I mean, it's not ours, effect from us, of course, but it got us surprisingly far.
Well, interesting. Okay. Well, that's something that we can certainly consider in the future. Cool. All right, Kyle, anything else on this one?
No, unless we talked about the GitHub thing that Brian and I talked about, but that's down the road too, where you could just directly clone an entire repo, and instead of viewing it, start interacting with it.
Yeah. I mean, that one, that I think is going to be super neat. I think very quickly when we do that, we will have to start formalizing, like, what does a requirements.txt look like for a collection of notebooks so that it becomes easier to say, when I clone this repo, I want to pull in these dependencies, or these are the things that I would like pip installed automatically when it starts. So that's one that I can see very,
that is a hard path.
Yeah, very quickly it becomes real work. It's super. I think it's awesome. But most interesting notebook repos out there don't just run with the standard library. They need other stuff.
Yeah, so all the SciPy stack is there, and sklearn, and
yes, so that which covers a lot. Yeah, it's missing. I tested it. It's missing scikit image, and I can't remember if it has Seaborn. Those are two.
Oh, it has Seaborn. I'll definitely add scikit image. That's in our. I think we have that in our example.
Yes,
notebooks.
Well, that's how I noticed.
Anyways.
I was going to show that example to someone, and it didn't run. I picked that specific example, and it didn't
That's
run.
funny.
Yeah.
Was it the image processing widget?
Yep.
I like that one. Cool.
All right. On atomic, the whole sync, atomic change. Brian, this is a PR that I actually was participating in when I was in Seattle. Can we put the PR number? Can somebody? Which one is it?
Multiple checkpoints. Just a.
Oh, sorry, I skipped. I'm sorry.
So on the multiple checkpoints, there was a discussion that happened at the sprint at SciPy between Fernando, myself, and I don't remember. It was either Kester or someone else was there.
Kester and one other fellow that was working with Kester. I think a fellow that I didn't know named Joe, I believe.
And for the first time, and basically what we realized is that as we move to different storage backends, such as Google Docs for notebooks that do support multiple checkpoints, it will be increasingly odd to our users that our notebook the default notebook server doesn't have multiple checkpoints. And even though in the past I have completely agreed that we don't want to go there, for the first time I thought, maybe we have to rethink that.
I wouldn't rethink that until people are annoyed by it, honestly. I would wait until that proves to be true.
Also, I think...
And then also still probably say no, but...
You're just waiting until people are annoyed enough to submit a pull request, huh?
No, they don't need to submit a pull. Like,
no, I'm just kidding.
It was 18 months of people yelling at us about lost data before we added autosave.
I don't know if that's something to brag about, but
it is. It is.
No, it's not. You should add autosave from day one, but I think I really don't want to. I don't want to add complexity that we always agreed was out of scope. To alleviate hypothetical confusion with a thing because it's less functionality than a thing that doesn't exist.
So we kind of the current state with, your latest save plus one checkpoint, I think is kind of the last logical stopping place before you implement a full version control system.
Yeah.
So
we would be implementing the worst version control system in the world.
Yeah, that's my fear, that this is the textbook example of the slippery slope argument, at the bottom of which lies Git, right?
I actually don't. I think the big revelation I had was thinking about this in the context of Google Drive, and I realized, oh no, like that's not Git. Like there's no way someone would use Google Drive's checkpoints and say, like this is Git. It's scope limited.
I've made very, very little use of Google Drive's checkpoints. I mean, like I had one sort of like collaboratively edited wiki-style spreadsheet where I used it to see like what other people were changing. But other than that, I don't think that many people will actually miss it that much. And if they are going to miss it, then stick it in Git. I mean, there is a solution already.
No, Brian, but I actually have had this argument in the past with people who tell me, I'm not going to learn Git because I think that Google Drive, linear kind of completely simplistic history, and Dropbox linear time-based history is more than enough, and that is the version control that I need, and they refuse to do proper version control on that argument. That basically,
I think that's fine. I mean, I love version control, but there's contexts where I use Dropbox or Google Docs.
Oh no, yeah, I use it too, but I don't pretend that it's a replacement for version control.
Well, and I'm not suggesting that. I'm saying it's different.
No, but what I'm saying is I've had people say, I'm just going to live with this, and I know that it makes working with a proper version control workflow with other people a pain in the ass, but I refuse to learn version control because I prefer using this interface, because, yes, it is a little bit easier in the simple cases to think about only a linear revision history, which gets you subversion, basically. And I have had people, I've had that argument with actually someone that I respect a lot intellectually, but who's just pretty much said, no, that this is why Git is unnecessary. This is why learning version control in a scientific context is unnecessary. Because this exists, because Dropbox exists, version control is not a tool that should be part of a scientific workflow. And I've had that argument made to me by scientists.
I can completely see that argument, and I would love version control to be.
Whoops.
But actually, I mean, I think.
I don't know.
You froze.
Who froze?
I think it might have been us.
Okay,
Yeah.
Thomas, can you repeat what you said, because you began speaking and that was it.
Yeah, I would I get that argument, and I would love to see version control being more friendly. I mean, I was at a software carpentry workshop who were teaching people Git, and I mean, Git's shortcomings when you try to teach it to new people are painfully apparent. But
yes,
I think building user-friendly version control systems is in scope for us.
Yeah, that's my fear. Go ahead, Jason.
So here's an interesting data point. So William implemented versioning at the file system layer, which you might say that's exactly where it should be. So automatic snapshots on ZFS, things like that provide a base level version control, and then of course you can use Git on top of that and separate from that to manage versions. But the checkpoints are provided by the file system, not by the notebooks.
Yes, but he's putting, he's putting real major effort into developing all of that. I had lunch with him on Friday and had lunch talking to the student who's doing that, and they're putting a lot of real work into like the scalability. They're already hitting limits when the number of revisions gets large. It has basically become a project. That is a project where someone is pretty much now working. I don't know how full-time, but this student, this is his project, right?
So my point is this is an argument for it being out of scope because it's more appropriate at the file system level.
Yeah, and it becomes, it's one of those things that becomes a project, right? I don't think...
Yeah.
Plus, I mean, Sage Math Cloud runs on a server or a set of servers that William controls.
Yeah, assuming ZFS is a bit... I've got a ZFS.
I'm just saying snapshots like Google Drive are at the storage layer, not the file layer, or it can be at the storage layer more appropriately than the file layer.
Oh yeah, certainly Google itself, Google Drive and Dropbox, they're not implementing that by putting just a little bit of JavaScript in the client. They're implementing that in their storage backends using whatever pretty beefy infrastructure they have, and making hard assumptions about how they have full control over the storage backend, and they can make whatever assumptions they need to make for that to be feasible and to work well and efficiently and whatnot. Yeah, I mean, I can... Now, on the other hand, Kyle is saying, yes, please. Kyle, yes, please.
Yeah, so I actually think that, like, we should get the experience right for doing it. So when I integrated with an object store to get it right, it seemed awkward compared to how the file setup was doing it. And in reality, like, I'd like to be able to even save from the JavaScript. Like, it doesn't even go back to the server, right? It just goes to whatever the, like, server that they're actually saving to. Maybe that's on their own desktop, but they have some objects.
So now we need not only a version control style interface, but one that we abstract, where we offer a version control lightweight interface that is abstracted over all possible object stores.
That's exactly what the Checkpoints API is.
There's two levels of API. There's a REST API and there's the JavaScript API. And part of what the Google stuff is doing will actually address some of that. Is moving some of the abstraction of document, separating the UI from the document model, and then the document model can actually implement how it saves and things, so that for Google Real-Time API in the case of Collaboratory, and then just a post in the case of our Contents Manager. And that should be here.
So here's one question. The data structure that we're using for storing checkpoints is already a list. I think it's a list of length 1, but it is already a list, isn't it?
Yeah, so the API, so this is the thing, that there's nothing in IPython that prevents multiple checkpoints from being supported by a
custom
content manager, or so the API is designed in such a way to support multiple checkpoints. It's just the default contents manager doesn't, because multiple checkpoints, by writing n copies of a file in a hidden directory, when those files might be 25 megs, and just hitting save 10 times gives you 1/4 gig on your file system, seems like not the best.
Yeah.
So
and the slippery slope thing of we don't want to
Yeah, so then you need to do, then you need heuristics about, okay, well, which ones do you save? How many do you keep?
Yeah, how deep does that
Yeah, is
history
it a
go?
buffer? Do you toss them?
Do heuristic culling, and you need to do all of those things.
Yeah.
You can't get out of it.
I mean, given that this is really going to be used by deployments that are I mean, the argument that's been made is why in a default local file system-based deployment, this is probably not going to work very well unless we put a ton of work into all those heuristics and calling and file size analysis and potential compression, etc. And then it becomes a project. But it may work well if your file system, if you're deploying in a context where your backend is ZFS-like or a data store that has built-in compression and the concept of multiple snapshots of an object and does its own diffing and whatnot. It seems to me like that argument says this is going to be for custom deployments, and those can have a custom content manager that plugs into that, and it doesn't seem like we're making that particularly difficult for anyone.
I mean, I can try to put together what the kind of Git-aware content manager would look like, because that is something that I guess that's theoretical at this point since I haven't written it. So the rest of the Contents API, Checkpoints API, they all support multiple checkpoints.
So, Kyle, for example, it seems to me like you have what you would need for a Cloud Files multi checkpoint deployment already.
In IPython 2.
Yeah. So why? I mean, I don't think we really need it in the default one that people get on their file system when they pip install or conda install or EPD install our own.
Clarify. So I guess I wouldn't want to force it on the users like that it would get used immediately. But if we had to face it being in there, we might see some of the warts around it. I feel like the code that I wrote is kind of awkward and is more or less like, how do I fit what's really a file model into an object store model? And it kind of works, but it's not.
Yeah,
it doesn't map all that well to me.
Enough, then.
What's that, Thomas?
I think I should just start playing with the Google stuff and see what they did.
Yeah, Thomas, what did you say? I couldn't hear you.
Yeah, I was kind of saying, I mean, we've always said that like going from n=1 to n=2 is when you find all of the assumptions that you've made that aren't quite right. So
and that's true.
If that API isn't quite the way it ought to be, then I think it's fine to work that out.
But yeah, but I wouldn't. What I would like to encourage is playing with that in a custom deployment with an object store of some kind, and then as we understand what needs to be fixed in the base API, if it turns out that we did miss a few of those points, we can fix them in the default one. But I really would not want to foist the idea of that feature being part of the base, because as Min said, the naive implementation is not what you need. The naive implementation, I mean, the experience for that is a time machine style in OS 10 implementation, and you had to do calling back over time. You can't do it with full history, full dense history. So you have to sparsify that going back in time and all that, because otherwise, the point Min made about size is your immediate problem, and that really makes me think that this should not be turned on by default. But it's totally sensible to play with it in a Rackspace style deployment, Google Drive style deployment, and fix back whatever issues that uncovers. Does that, Kyle, seem sensible to you, and does that give you enough to work with? Kyle? Kyle
might be stuck.
Kyle disappeared. Brian, you were saying yes a little bit. Would you be okay with that if we test this further in custom deployments, but we still keep it off the main one for now?
Oh no, I think what Min said at the very beginning, namely, let's wait till our users start to yell at us about this.
Yeah, because it's not hard to say, the simplest heuristic of n checkpoints equals 5 and just delete the oldest one and change nothing else.
Mm-hmm.
Doing, density-based culling that most real checkpoint systems do would be harder and probably out of scope. But if people really are confused by the lack of multiple checkpoints, I think we can respond to that in a timely manner.
Sure. If it really becomes a problem, yeah, we can do 3 or 5 or something like that, and with no fancy heuristics. But
Make it configurable.
Yes,
Yeah.
I'm sure we would.
yeah, that's the conversation I don't want to have. Okay, let's move on from this one.
Actually, for
Yeah?
total side channel, I'm about to submit the Strata talk.
Yeah?
And it's asking me for your bio and a photo URL for you. And
Right
the bio
now?
that it wants to paste in is old, I think. Like it knows about you, but not the updated you. Can you just point to me?
Yeah.
I just need, because they said I needed to submit this before noon.
Yep.
and
I have that. I have that stuff ready. I'll paste that on a side channel.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay, but since I'm going to be doing that for a second, can somebody take over?
So the hold sync and on atomic change pull request was merged with those names, and sort of later, what I realized was it would, because those two names are reflecting the same abstraction, it would be nice if there was more parallelism between the names. And so I was thinking about something like hold sync and on hold sync, or atomic sync and on atomic sync, or something that's just, because they're really the same thing.
I like atomic sync and on-atomic sync, I think.
And I...
That seems fine to me.
Who's crackling? Is that...
Cool. I think you have to be careful because on hold sync will be triggered not just when you do hold sync. So if you have hold sync and on hold sync, then it sounds like you're listening for the same event, but really they're related abstractions, but they're not the same event. You can trigger an on hold sync without doing a hold sync.
Yes, but do you think...
How?
On hold sync, all it does is it triggers once for every model change.
It's basically bulk updates.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, I mean, but I think that's where I think the hold sync is not quite the best name, whereas on atomic sync is a better name because it's syncing the whole model, or a bulk of that model. You think that works, Jason?
Oh, hang on. We're trying to get Sylvan in here, and I missed what you were saying. Here's Sylvan. What did you say again?
What's the other way that you can achieve bulk update of something without the atomic sync context?
So, for example, the initial state syncing.
Yes.
Is something where you don't have to do the hold sync.
Mm-hmm.
And in reality, every time you change something, you'll trigger that on atomic sync. It's triggered every time. Oh, do we have splitters? I don't know. I can't hear you. I'm going to try to put my computer on.
So possibly, should there just be like a on sync? I mean, it sounds like this event is just really on sync, then not on atomic sync specifically.
Oh, you're gonna. Okay. Someone's gonna listen on YouTube. Apparently, the Hangout is full. We've reached a new milestone.
we got
Just
we
stuck
got
back
10. We got 10. All right.
So someone keep an eye on chat.
Yeah.
Oops.
All right. So.
Sorry, what was our discussion? Where did we leave off?
I'm
So it sounds like this event fires on any sync. Then why is it on atomic sync rather than just on sync?
See, I think it should be on change, and with the understanding that basically you can filter the change event for the union of some events, because really that's what it is. It's a filter on the on change event. So it executes your function if any one of these attributes changed.
Well, my only complaint about that is it's so similar to all the other naming of on change, but with a slightly different twist. Like it's different from just on change.
It's different from just on change. It's a filtered on change.
Could we not just have on change events with some kind of piece of data that you can use to do the filtering? Because it seems like I'm still not clear on under what circumstances does on change get fired, but on atomic whatever does not get fired?
The atomic one gets fired when any or all of those attributes gets changed.
Why isn't it just like on model change? It's on any change, right?
No, it's not any. It's any or all.
That's
so.
So here's all right. The subset of any.
I know. I'm being explicit about.
But yeah, so
here's how the event framework works. When an event comes in, right? So when a sync happens, it goes through every one of the attributes and triggers a change event for each specific attribute. Then it triggers a global model change event. And with this, and so sometimes you don't want to run your function unless one or more of the model attributes have changed. So you want to basically filter running your function on whether if one of these 5 attributes change, then I want to run my function. But if one of these 5 attributes didn't change, then don't worry about running my function. So you can't really trigger on each of the 5 attributes, because then your function runs 5 times, one for each attribute update. So you have to register a change event with the global model change, but then you just have to put the one line of code to filter, check to see if one of these 5 attributes changed. What this function does is it just saves you that one line and makes it semantically clear what you're doing, and that is, if any of these 5 attributes have changed, trigger this function.
It seems clearer to me for the event to have data saying which things have changed, and then handlers that want to check that just do if any of these in changed, then do this.
Yeah, that was the debate in my mind too.
For handlers.
Whether it's worth it to save the one if statement, basically. It comes up fairly often, and having a specifically named function makes the intent clearer than always trying to parse this if statement and see, wait, is this doing what I think it's doing, etc.
But I mean, JavaScript being a language rich in callbacks, you could easily make a wrapper thing around on change that does the check and then calls your...
That's exactly what this is.
Yeah, it just registers an on change callback.
Yep, and then it checks to see if one of your events changed, and then it calls your function.
Event, it's just a...
Yeah, it's just an on change handler that...
So the first question, I guess, is whether it's worth the overhead of a function, maintenance more than anything, to save that one line of code. And I think because it comes up often enough that it's worth having a special function for it.
Yeah, I would agree.
But it comes up. I mean, it's not exactly one-to-one corresponding with the hold sync on the Python side.
Okay.
Yeah, so this is a shorthand for on any of these keys changing.
That's right. Run this function once when the model is changed.
Yeah. And the Python side is a context manager that's like, don't send any sync events until, or send at most one sync message in for during this context.
Right.
Is that right?
Right. So often they are paired, but it's not always one-to-one. Right.
Yeah, and one is registering a callback. It's just shorthand for registering a callback, really.
Yeah,
And the other is actually preventing bundling sync events.
They're not really symmetric.
Yeah.
They're not really symmetric, right?
In that case, I wouldn't try to give them corresponding names.
Yeah, that makes sense to me.
Let me change it.
So I'm sorry. The conclusion was leave the same names?
I'm not sure. Having read it, I'm surprised by the atomic name. I know I'm pretty sure I +1 the atomic name, but that was based on my reading that it was more symmetrical with the hold sync.
Yeah.
And now I think it's kind of a confusing name. That something like it, I don't, on any changed or
on keys changed or something. Yeah, it seems like I think on atomic change has the wrong name at present, but I don't think they should.
Yeah, and I don't have a problem with hold sync.
I don't hear anything.
Testing.
All right. Actually, I have to run. Strata proposal's done.
Awesome. Thank you, Brian.
Everyone, I'll catch you all online later.
See you, Brian. Thanks.
Bye.
Thanks.
But the discussion is still going.
Yeah. So it seems like.
And I missed it. I was frantically finishing stuff for this Strata talk as well. So I
seems like the atomic sync is a bit confusing, but the two things aren't symmetrical, so don't need to match.
So it.
I don't think there's a problem with hold sync if somebody has a better name. Whatever.
Just a quick remark on the name. To me, they're really not only unsymmetrical. It's also that the pull request has another part, which is that even an initialization of a widget, the attributes are set same time rather than sequentially.
Yeah.
And so, which is also an optimization. And to me, so the on bulk change or atomic change is can also be used regardless of the hold sync on the Python side, even for initialization of a widget.
Yeah.
So I like the bulk. Oh, I can't hear Min anymore.
Oh. No. Okay.
Yeah, I can hear Min.
Is it your speaker or is it my microphone?
I can hear Min. Can anyone else hear Min?
Hear you.
No, it's just that Jason was tweaking the controls to try to have sound. So what did you say, Min?
Okay, I don't remember. It happens any of those keys changes, right? Just at most once per change event.
Yeah, but it also happens only once when two of them get changed, while before.
That's what I tried to say, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not really on an atomic change. It's on.
It seems like on any change.
Keys.
Like if you were to write the Python code for this, it would be if any keys changed, do this callback.
Yeah, totally. So any is Pythonic, some is more JavaScriptic, if this exists.
That's true. No, I would be fine with on some changed, since some is actually called in the function itself, right? I think it's keys.sum.
I think atomic is confusing. I agree with you.
No, I think we agree on that. Yeah, so if you want to just call it on some changed or on any changed, if you want to push some Python into the JavaScript, which we do.
Yeah, I don't really care.
Infrequently. Yeah, so whoever makes that PR first, we'll go with config sum or any. I don't have a preference.
Okay.
All right. Somebody record that decision. It sounds like there was a decision I'm happy with on some changed. No, Sylvain, it was not a decision?
It sounds like it's a decision.
Okay, please.
Okay, so I push that. I had a question for Thomas regarding the widgets with no views, whether eventually he thinks that we should allow for view name to be none.
Thomas?
I'm still thinking through all this one at the moment. So the two cases we currently have of widgets that don't really have a view are the widget base class, which now, having thought about it more, I think instantiating the widget class itself should just raise a Python error.
Yeah, it should raise not implemented error or something.
Yeah, it's effectively an abstract base class. The only way to use it practically is by subclassing it. And the link widget, which is in a PR, which I now think is fundamentally wrong and not something that we want to put into IPython. I mean, wrong in that I don't want it to be something we do. Other people want to do things like outside the IPython code base, that's fine, but yeah, it's completely not what the widget model view sync call infrastructure is designed for. I mean, but that will take us back into the whole big hairy widget discussion, so perhaps we shouldn't go into that just now.
Yeah.
Jason?
It's just a spinning chair or something, was it?
What's that, Jay?
I think we might have technical difficulties in New York.
Okay. Jason, can you hear us?
Nope.
No.
No.
Sylvain, can you hear us? This seemed to be something that you guys wanted, but well, it's going to be hard for Jason to hear us when he doesn't even have his headset on. So.
Yeah. Shall we?
Okay. All right, let's move on then.
Yeah, we can come back if they come back.
Tag.
Just a question of...
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
Seems fine.
And
Yeah, go for it.
I would prefer to have Brian here for the Code Mirror 4 stuff.
Yeah.
But one of the issues is like I don't know why before our keyboard event handler was intercepting events maybe before Code Mirror, but because now events are bubbling up always, or maybe it's a timing issue, there are some things we cannot do anymore with Code Mirror 4. Like, for example, we cannot have, when you do up arrow in a cell, when you are on the first line, you cannot anymore go to the beginning of the cell, and then when you press up again, go to the previous cell. You cannot do that anymore. Unless you do weird listening to events twice by both registering the keyboard handler to check for both Code Mirror events and global events.
Ouch! That is a real usability loss. I remember that would drive us crazy, getting out of the cell so easily. I remember that when before we added that additional, like when you get to the top, go to the beginning and make it feel a little bit more like a text editor rather than a continuous sequence.
We can add state to the keyboard manager.
But so wait. So the keyboard manager doesn't even get an event?
Yes, it does. It does, but after Code Mirror moves. So basically, you cannot know.
Oh, I see. So you can't do. Okay, so the issue is that we can't do a different behavior for on the beginning of the line versus on the beginning of the line and at the. Sorry.
You cannot do.
Yeah, the Code Mirror moves the cursor before the keyboard manager gets the event.
Yes.
So we can't have different behavior.
Or
you cannot have,
but not at the beginning of the line versus at the top and at the beginning of the line.
I don't know. I think that's okay. Hitting up to go to the beginning of the line.
One thing is, it's one of the things I have found. There might be others.
Okay.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay, then in that case, I do agree that CodeMirror is such a strongly user-facing component that we definitely want to sort of battle test this in the real world. If nothing else, I guess we should do it in a branch. It's saying that the CI build isn't completing. Do we know? Is that a real
that's
error?
because components need to be merged.
Okay.
Once CodeMirror 4 is in components, we can update master. Master will build.
Okay. So should we all start testing this PR in our own
And
personal
the other
use for the next
thing
few days?
to be recorded is that there is no docstring and no explanation at all on how the keyboard manager is supposed to work or why some functions sometimes return true and sometimes return false. So I made some assumption, and I would really like Brian to come and say why he did some things.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So let's basically, as a decision, that we, as many of us as possible, try to use this branch, this PR, as our working branch, and then we loudly complain on the PR with about whatever doesn't work.
And it's awesome because you can have multi-cursor in each cells, and you can type at many places at once.
Okay, yeah, that's something that I've been dreaming about every day. I can't live without. All right, awesome. So we all try this one out.
Is there any reason to not merge the components one? We don't have any other stuff working in components right now, right?
Oh, let's go ahead.
Because the only reason to not merge the components PR, is if someone else is going to make a different components PR that needs to get merged before the CodeMirror PR gets merged. But I don't think we need to worry about that.
Go for it.
Right.
Okay, I wanted to decide on HipChat. Are we happy with Gitter? Are we gonna switch from HipChat to Gitter? I mean, we are paying for HipChat. It's not a ton of money, but there's no reason to keep paying for it if we're not actually going to use it. So I wanted to get a sense from people about how they feel about Gitter overall. How has the workflow been for you?
What's HipChat?
I'm sorry, one at a time. I can't hear two people. Min?
I haven't launched HipChat in a while.
And are you happy with Gitter overall?
Yeah, I think literally everything about it is better.
Okay, Matthias, what did you have to say?
What is HipChat?
Okay. Okay. Anyone? Okay. Let me ask the question a different way. Anyone want to keep HipChat around? Fine. Okay. We're canceling the HipChat account. Okay.
I wouldn't say everything about Getter is better, but I'm perfectly happy with Getter.
We're not going to keep both.
No.
So is there a very strong reason? Gitter was an.
I'm happy with Getter. I just wanted to do.
My extravagant statement was maybe
okay.
far, but
okay. Okay, perfect.
It doesn't
so
have an Android app yet.
Yes, that's an important thing. That doesn't. Yeah.
Say what?
Gitter doesn't have an Android app yet, for instance. They say it's coming, but
they only got the other apps quite recently. So
yeah.
Okay. Okay. Well,
we didn't have any activity on HipChat for at least a week, regardless of room, and only one YOLO in help room.
Okay.
Yeah, when we rebuilt the website with the links pointing to Getter, then people basically stopped coming to HipChat.
Okay, perfect. All right. Finally, because we're already at an hour and a half, on the Authenticator, Kyle, that was you? Did we lose Kyle? It seems like we lost Kyle.
We seem to have lost Kyle. Yeah,
okay.
So there's a question about some Docker things. So right now with the Jupyter Hub, the multi-user server, there are a couple examples. One is a Docker container that runs just one server in a single Docker container with GitHub OAuth, and it uses real Unix users, all just on one shared Docker VM container, whatever. And then there's a second example that actually runs the Jupyter Hub on the host machine and then spins up a Docker container for every user, still, again, using GitHub for OAuth, but not using Unix users. And so there's some question that Kyle and I need to figure out in terms of building images. Do we want to build a base image so that other people can easily extend with configuration so that they don't need to build it all from scratch? But I think that's a minor thing we can.
Okay, well let's
deal with offline.
let's move that one to next week when Kyle's here. Does anyone have any last points that they want to bring up? Especially Jess, I don't know if I see you. I don't know if you're around. You, is there anything on your mind right now for the meeting that you want to bring up?
Not today.
Okay, all right. Anyone else have anything? Damian, the people, I'm kind of checking with the people who haven't spoken a lot today. Jonathan, Damian, everything okay? All right, let's wrap it up at 1.5 hours, and we'll hop on the decision-making meetings as needed, and otherwise we'll see everybody next week.
Yeah.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Bye, Internet.
Oh,